So this is called the two spirits. And again, one of the fundamental aspects of Ignatian spirituality, that there are two spirits working on it, two opposing spirits. And we're just going to go into that a little bit. Remember last week, this was the key image from last week about that we try to keep ourselves at a point of balance. And it's an image of tension, essentially, though, that there's a system of tension, but we try to find a balance between all the different pulls and forces, etc. But especially remember the thing about detachment or freedom. We try to make sure that we're free in order to act well, in order to be able to make good decisions. And one of the big things that can hold us back is this thing about the spirits that are operating on us, which we're going to get into just in a second here. So again, just going back to the story of Ignatius, remember, we always go back to the story because it's the fundamental experience. And almost everything in the spiritual exercises relates to an experience that Ignatius had. So his life story is key in terms of the spirituality, obviously. So again, just going back to, remember, he was a courtier, first of all. Then he was injured in Pamplona in the battle against the French, really serious leg wound. Remember, he was recuperating in the room back at Loyola in his home place. He was there for some months. And when he was having these different daydreams, and he was having these experiences of the dreams, he was reflecting. He was noticing that there was a difference between them. Remember the consolation and the desolation. He noticed that the romantic dreams, the kind of hero type stuff, it was pleasant at the time, but it left him dry and empty. That was the desolation part of it. That's the bad spirit that we're going to get into in a second. And then the other dreams, the dreams about imitating the saints, outdoing, Saint Dominic, Saint Francis, etc. That brought him life and energy, and it stayed with him for quite a while. That was the good spirit acting. God was bringing him in a certain direction, and he decides that he's going to change his life, and he makes quite a radical change. Remember, he goes on this pilgrimage across Spain, across the neck of Spain. So he goes from Loyola across to Manresa, which is one of the big Ignatian sites over near Barcelona. This is the Pyrenees in the background here. And remember, he was on the horseback. Remember, he met the Muslim last week, and he had this kind of interchange, and he was all fired up. He was going to kill the guy at one stage. Unfortunately, the donkey took the other road, and he was spared that fate. But he eventually arrives in Manresa, and he lives in a cave for a while, and he had some of his key experiences in the cave. Obviously, a very simple lifestyle, and he'd given up all his previous life. In fact, he'd give away all his clothes, etc. And he was just living as a poor beggar on the streets in Manresa. And again, quite an extreme lifestyle. And he was big into fasting at this stage, and he did some real extreme fasts, and he damaged his stomach apparently permanently. He damaged his health quite a bit. And some of the walking pilgrimages were very extreme. The fasting, these kind of disciplines that he was doing with himself. And the interesting thing is that in terms of balance, obviously, he was still a little bit out of balance. He was still going a bit too extreme. And it took him a while to figure out how to get that balance and how to roll back on some of these things, which seemed like good things, but you're bringing him in a bad direction. One of the key things that he struggled with was this thing called scruples. Somebody's really scrupulous means they couldn't continue to go back over things and continually doubt themselves. And he used to go to confession regularly, and then he would come back from confession, and then he would doubt that he really meant that about confessing those sins, and he would go back again and confess again, maybe the next day, or within a very short space of time. And he was completely tormented with this and driven mad by it, to the point, and this is probably the most serious aspect of Ignatian spirituality in terms of where he ended up. He was contemplating suicide, basically throwing himself out of a window. He was driven mad with these thoughts and the continual cycle of doubting himself and confessing, and then going back again and going round and round this cycle. But the thing about Ignatius is he's amazingly reflective, and he realizes that obviously this thing is bringing him to a really bad place. And he realizes this is not good. This is not from God. This is the bad spirit operating, is what Ignatius calls it. The bad spirit is trying to undermine him, trying to dig into something that seems like a good thing, right? It's good to be have a sensitive conscience, and it's good to just to feel bad about things you've done wrong, but taken to excess, you can see how that is very damaging. And in fact, it's quite a contemporary thing. People get caught up in this thing, and the real trap is that it appears to be a good thing. Why wouldn't I, be sensitive? Why wouldn't I confess? Why wouldn't I, feel remorseful for what I've done wrong? So it starts off as a good thing, and then it ends up bringing you to a really bad place, and that's a sign of the bad spirit operating. It digs into these little vulnerabilities or these sensitivities we have, starts off as a good thing, and then brings us to a really bad place. So that image of the scales, and the scale is completely tipped down on one side. There's no balance left. It's completely out of balance, and it's bringing you to a very bad place. And the bad spirit is in control of the situation and in control of decisions. And the real tragedy is that it seems like a good thing, and people find it difficult to unearth the problem, to get perspective, to see what's going on. And that's why reflection is so critical. It's not just about the small things, it's about the bigger picture, noticing where things are going, and also the whole trajectory of things. So it can start off as a good thing, and then the middle and the end, Ignatius says, have to be good as well. To where it brings you to is also key, the direction and the ending and how it ends up. So good things can start out looking fine and then bring you to a bad place. So the continual reflection and continually evaluating how things are going on. So then that image of the two forces, the two spirits are working on us. So we have one for good, obviously, and one for evil. So he calls it the bad spirit and the good spirit. It's important here not to get into it. It's not demonic possession or anything. It's just like that sense of people, we're free agents, and there's these influences that are coming at us. And it's like there's two voices speaking to us at the same time. One voice is trying to encourage us for good, and the other voice is trying to encourage us for bad. And it's just to notice again which is which, and to distinguish. This is the discernment again, to clearly distinguish what is the voice of God that is good, and what is the voice that's not of God and which is bad and bringing us to a bad place. So distinguishing those two things, one of the key things. So here, we've seen this before, but just in terms of the good spirit is always consolation. Sorry, I just jumped ahead there. The good spirit is always consolation. That's the sign of the good spirit. So it's always towards hope and to the light. So that awareness exercise Christine has done is about the light, about living in the light. And then just objectively being selfless, obviously helping other people. And that thing about being community or church-minded in terms of a group, going outwards, connecting with people. And then there's the feelings. Remember the affective dimension, feeling consoled or feeling uplifted. So that's the consolation, that movement, the movement of the good spirit is that direction. That's the nature of it. Then obviously the opposite, desolation, the bad spirit is away from hope or light. So that thing about despair, emptiness, bringing people to a really, really bad place. Apparently one of the signs of the bad spirit is feeling that you have no options, that I have no choices left, that there's nothing I can do. That's a real sign of the bad spirit. It's one of the triggers, for realizing that you're being led by the nose to a bad place. You have no options. So the thing about being selfish, obviously, in the sense of not thinking about others or just thinking about oneself, being isolated is one of the signs, being cut off, and not trusting in others, not believing there are good people in the world type thing. And then finally, the feeling aspect, feeling desolate or feeling empty is part of that as well. So it's the whole combination of factors. Remember the direction, the objective situation, what I'm actually doing, and then the feeling dimension of it. There's always those three elements in that. So then to try to capture that, we have this image from, this is from the spiritual exercises as well. Ignatius uses this image, a tap, and the water coming out of the tap, it drips on a sponge, and that is consolation. Water going into a sponge is consolation because it's easy and it's natural and it fits and it's coherent and there's no resistance. There's something easy about it. And then desolation is the opposite. It's water on a stone. So water on a stone splashes. There's a sense of jarring. There's a sense of unease. There's a sense of there's something not quite right here. So again, the keys to the good spirit and the bad spirit, the consolation and the desolation, and the feel, you get a feel off that, the feel of water on a sponge, the feel of water on a stone. And then that's I'm just going to finish here. That's the end of the presentation.